Advanced Judging 2.0. To those of you wondering why it's 2.0, because I've already done 1.0. I did it last semester. If you would like to watch that workshop, it's on YouTube. The reason I'm telling you this is there are theses in this workshop that like carry forward to this workshop that I covered in the last workshop, but I don't re-go over what they are and things like that. They're very basic things, or not very basic things, but they're things that won't take you very long to go over. If you were to watch that workshop, you know, things like everything is an argument and things like that, and just how you credit things. So those philosophies carry forward into this workshop. I'm not going to be re-explaining them just in the interest of time and things like that, but I would recommend you watch that one. Irrespective, this one has a lot of independent content, so you'll be completely fine. I'm going to cover a few things. The first thing is understanding the AIV, just because I did some research and stuff into it for a previous workshop. Also because at the Trinity IV, I did an introduction to what the AIV was, and I got clowned every round for it for no reason, even though I was right. Secondly, close comparisons and just how to evaluate them. The TLDR of that now is you compare them like any other comparison, but they're closer. Then how to manage a deliberation, how to give an OA. So in Advanced Judging 1.0, I covered how to be an excellent panelist. Well done, you guys have graduated to chairs now. Well done, Cyrus. Which means that you're going to have to do things like manage a deliberation and how to give an OA and things like that. So just to give a few ideas on these things. One thing that does carry over from the last workshop into this workshop, the issue with judging very often is that, well, every debate is different, so you have to do different things when you judge. So it's hard to come up with hard and fast rules of specifically how to judge. So often judging workshops should become a series of don't do this. So that's just a disclaimer. I'll be doing a lot of that. Okay, understanding the AIV and what the AIV is. This is the really big cringe definition of what the AIV is for the recent judging manual. There's also a bunch of different names the AIV has. So ordinary informed voter, average intelligent voter, ordinary intelligent voter, average informed voter, ordinary informed voter. IGC is intelligent global citizen, ordinary reasonable voter. They're all the same thing. But the broad premise of it is that they can judge EP within the parameters of the rules, and they know things, but they don't know too much things. It is the TLDR. I'll be semi-referring back to some of these things, but the things you need to note down are they're not convinced by things like being sophisticated or deception and things like that. So they don't like lies. They're convinced by things like logic. They're convinced and they're open-minded to be convinced about a few things. The most important application of AIV in debating is in reference to facts or statistics or things like that, or just empirical evidence that teams tend to provide in debates. Because all of the other things in the AIV don't really need to apply, right? Because usually you just adjudicate the debate that happened in reference to the motion, and that's all you need. But sometimes teams drop a fact, they're like, here's a fun fact, and then you need to decide whether you can credit it or not. So what are the issues with using the AIV, and what pitfalls do judges fall into when they're not as experienced, or they haven't done Advanced Judging 2.0? Basically, people think that the AIV is stupid. But they're actually not stupid. The clue is in the name, intelligent or informed, or things like that, which would usually elicit that they're not stupid. I have a few theses as to why this has kind of occurred in debating. I'll walk you through it when I do this. So take each thing separately. So they are average, they are informed or intelligent, and they're a voter. The issue that I think happens is that people amalgamate these terms. So they assume average intelligent voter to mean voter of average intelligence. But that's not true. They are intelligent and they are average. So what I mean by that? Voter, this is very easy, no one gets this wrong, who cares? Intelligent, so they're basically intelligent independently of being average. And what the word average means is just an echolocation, an amalgamation of the identities of this person. So they're of no particular place, age, and all of the other identity markers that could apply, aside from intelligence. Otherwise, we would just call them the average voter, but that's not what we call them. We call them the average intelligent voter, and things like that. And there are descriptions in the manual about they read a bunch of newspapers and things like that. I would posit that as more intelligent than most people in the world. So please do regard them as intelligent. That is the issue, I think, that happens a lot. The other issue is that most people in debating are dumber than the average intelligent voter. This is a problem. I will go over solutions in a second. Obviously, the main solution is know more about the world, but I guess I can't just say that facetiously get away with it during a workshop. So I'll try and fix that issue. So the first thing that you want to avoid doing is internalize. The first thing that you want to do to stop yourself from making the average intelligent voter stupid is just internalize as much as you can that this person reads a lot of things. I'll cover each of these things in 7 slides. The second thing is essentially crediting facts or empirical evidence at a similar plane to which you would credit normal logic and things like that. So applying similar burdens of proof to proving that thing within the first place. The third thing is understanding what knowledge is versus intuition. Again, I'll go over that. The fourth thing is just being reasonable. So going over this in reverse chronological order, being reasonable. The first thing you want to ask yourself is, how much can they actually do? Because some things are just true, and they're just true, right? I think Adam went over this in his workshop last semester about incentives and capacity and things like that. I went over this in my first workshop and things like that. So for example, the phrase or the fact the president of Turkmenistan implemented a ban on non-white cars, actually how do you explain this? Apart from the structural reason that he likes white. But expecting that would be a bit silly because that's not really a logical argument. It's just another fact, right? So the take here isn't to be charitable, but just be reasonable, right? Because your job as an adjudicator is to assess logical links. A part of an assessment of logical links is assessing the burdens, i.e. the logical links required to prove a claim in the first place. And I would posit that that also requires a more nuanced assessment of the presence of or the requirement of these logical links. So just be reasonable about claims. The other thing is that a lot of things in the world aren't really that ridiculous. Go check it. It might sound, that's the second thing. So assessing a fact that you don't know. Maybe you didn't know the Turkmenistan. The first thing you want to look at is underlying or surrounding analysis. So do they illustrations of the scenario in which they've used this fact or used this statistic or used this empirical evidence make this more plausible? Does it make it more well explained and things like that? Because I would posit that just dropping a piece of empirical evidence into the water with no context, no further analysis, no impacting as to what that does in relevance to the motion is not a good argument in and of itself. So in the same way that you wouldn't credit just random, non-empirical, but you know what I mean, non-empirical things, you wouldn't also credit this. So try and assess the rigor of this thing in the first place. If it feels like you don't know it and it feels like a drop in the water, it really probably is, so you probably shouldn't credit it. The second thing is just to gut check it. A lot of things about the world really aren't that unbelievable. And even if you're dumber than the average informed voter, you probably have some knowledge about how the world works and things like that. So maybe if I tell you something like Mexico's free public universities, that doesn't sound that unbelievable, and it's probably something that, why would I lie about that in an argument sort of thing, you know what I mean? The third thing is just an assessment of what this piece of empirical evidence is. Is it an outcome or is it something that leads to an outcome and things like that? So, if you know what the premise of that, if you know the premise of that logical link, or you know the outcome of that logical link is true, then you can probably logically credit it and things like that. So, if I give you the example of after the July Revolution, Sheikh Hasina fled to India, but this is AIB knowledge, but imagine you don't know this. You probably know that the July Revolution happened to oust Sheikh Hasina. You also probably know that India is geographically close to Bangladesh. So logically, this probably tracks quite well, insofar as the average informed voter might know the surrounding parameters of this fact, and therefore this fact is probably something that can be deductible given general knowledge about the world. Again, one is probably an expectation here. So giving speakers giving more analysis about this empirical fact is probably something that's good in and of itself. So you probably defer to one in this case. Again, if that is true, but you're having to do the assumptions, then maybe it's just not good analysis in and of itself. But in terms of crediting something that you don't know, these are some heuristics you can follow. I recognize it can be hard. Okay, knowledge versus intuition. So, so basically, you're not supposed to adjudicate the debate from the intuitions of the AIB, of the knowledge of the AIB. So it is just a verification of the facts that you're able to credit, as opposed to the intuitions that you bring, you pre-bring to the debate. Because otherwise, every debate would end like with the call going to whoever's like a bit center right and more religious on average. But that's obviously like not how debates are adjudicated or assessed, but rather on proof of why you ought to care about certain metrics and things like that. So it's not of the intuitions that the amalgamation of this average individual would have, but of the intelligence and therefore the knowledge that is accrued through that intelligence that you ought to credit. This is just a mistake that some judges make sometimes. I think you guys are probably okay with this. Yeah, that question. Specialist versus technical. This is really important. So, in the big thing, in the big wall of text that is said about the AIB, it says that they lack specialist knowledge. It doesn't say that they lack technical knowledge. What I mean by this is that often judges are willing to credit empirics like this. So like the BJP was forced into a coalition in the most recent election, or things like Parasite won the Oscar for Best Picture. However, as soon as it becomes a little bit scientific, so Cyrus will say something like California is near like tectonic plates or something, and then or it's adversely affected by climate change, and then judges are like, but that's specialist knowledge or technical knowledge that I ought not credit and things like that. Am I right, Cyrus? Or things like hydrogen batteries are more long-lasting and eco-friendly than petrol engines, because they don't require combustion reaction, right, Adam? And things like that. So I think so basically what happens is that judges go, but this is technical and therefore it is specialist. But like this is like GCSE science level shit, right? Like this isn't technical, like this isn't specialist knowledge at all. It's slightly technical. So think about it, like, and what I say here is just fix up, right? If you credit a similar level of rigor or logical chain in something like economics or politics or art, you can credit it in something like science or climate-related debates and things like that. I would posit that these types of debates are becoming more common, I think, in order to keep them around and make sure speakers buy into these kinds of debates, because they are fun. You should credit the knowledge that they do have insofar as I think it's just normal knowledge. And all the other things about how the average informed voter has probably read about things like climate and hydrogen batteries and stuff like that. Okay, I realize now this looks like the judge actually that you fucked. No. The judge manual actually makes it that you read a fuck ton. So, like, the judge manual says something like that this guy, like, or this individual reads a lot of newspapers, reads all of its headlines, reads other things like The Economist and things. Like, that's a lot of fucking reading, right? Like, think about how many newspapers exist. They all have like 9 sections, so they have news, other news, world news, lifestyle, opinion, culture, and all of those sections. There are multiple of them, and there are well-known magazines, things like The Economist and things like that. That is way more reading than literally any of us do. That is a crazy amount of reading. I've never read that many headlines in my life. And this average informed voter like reads those every day. So like, yes, they read a lot. They probably know a lot. So just internalize in your mind that the rigor, sorry, not the rigor, the breadth of knowledge of the average informed voter is probably really, really big. Okay, so this is an activity I'm going to do. I did this in the workshop I did for the SSDC Training Academy, but I only had like 3 people there, so it wasn't that long. It's called Yes, No, Yes, But. This is very simple. I'm going to get you guys into 4 groups. I'm going to send one of you a document, and you're just going to group these facts into whether you would yes credit them at face value, no wouldn't credit them and couldn't see yourself crediting them, or yes but and requires maybe 1 or 2 more slight explanations. If it's like a whole wall of explanation you need for it, put it in the no column. So the groups you guys are not doing it, so we'll do Adam, Carol, Danny and Colton, group 1, Matt, Freya, Navia, group 2, Cyrus, Sarah, Saidia. All right, let's reconvene. I'm going to start with group 3. So you guys, yes, you guys believe. Huh? It's all right. Don't worry. So you guys would not credit on face value, or would not credit and believe that you wouldn't credit that every drought in history, the price of grain went up. Why would you not credit that?
You said the word every posted.
Okay. Interesting.
The absolutes is what.
Don't like the absolutes. Group 4, why would you disagree with this? Why would you look to credit this?
I think that I mean a major requirement for growing grain is water. So I think that it's just kind of logical that when water is harder to find, means you can grow less grain, which means that with inflation it would be more expensive.
Yeah. Group 1, you guys were broadly of the opinion that it would need more of an explanation.
Are we just going to put anything that we had significant disagreements on into yes, but?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think it does require more of an explanation, and obviously all of these things depend on what context they were said in. So if anyone literally just said that and said nothing else, that would be just a bad argument because it's not an argument. But if someone said something along the lines of the analysis that Summer just gave, and then tried to bolster it with that empirical evidence, I think it would be completely fine to claim. So why was there ardent disagreement on Green Book in Group 1?
Oh, basically we agree that like I think the average person probably knows that one best picture at some point, like that seems like reasonable entertainment knowledge to have, and we just weren't sure if it was 2017 specifically or not. And so we thought that we probably wouldn't necessarily credit that part. It was crucial to the argument that it had to be that year, but I think it's reasonable to say that it won best picture.
You're also a yes button Group 4. What do you think?
Same reason. I think adding the year just leads to more confusion than is necessary for whatever point you're trying to make about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in an oral adjudication, you would probably, like, I can't think of a debate context in which this is important at all. People just generally tend to know that it won best picture. It also didn't win it in 2017, won it in 2018. So, well done. You guys see that. Group 4, you're a yes but on the BlackRock assets. Explain yourself.
I don't know. I think it could be true. It could not be true. I think it causes some like intuitive questions to any judge. So I think there's probably some work to do to explain what they mean by interconnected assets and how it actually ends up being important and why that figure in itself is important.
Group 2, you're flat out no on BlackRock. Explain yourself.
We were pretty much in the thing that like it's like a yes but it's so much explanation that we're not saying it's empirics, because this is saying that one company controls 25% of the world's stuff, which I thought was kind of stupid. I can see that you could explain what interconnected assets is and explain what BlackRock and explain how this works, and I could buy it. But at this point, it's not empirics anymore. So
Yeah, I do think it's like erring on the yes but towards a no. The reason for this is just like, what the fuck's an interconnected asset? Like, to explain that, you would have to explain the interconnectedness of the economy. And then that's just like saying that everyone owns everything. Like, that's obviously like not true. So it is an interesting fact. I think there's a academic way of getting there, but I'm not sure that you do in and of itself. Group 1, you wouldn't credit the bong market stuff. Why?
We're going to find that one.
The key policy platform.
We have no idea who that is, and it's so non-specific that we're also, I mean, if this is a real person, which like, he may or may not be, maybe I'm making a fool out of myself right now, but we just thought like, you need to tell us more about what this is.
Group 3, you're on a yes but on bong markets.
This feels the kind of thing that info slide was like, bong markets. Like,
Yeah.
Everybody would run this, and Adam would be like, well, obviously that's a clear case.
Yeah.
Also, it's called free economic zones, FTs and Zs.
Yeah, so usually they're called free trade zones, but Bong calls them free economic zones. Bong Marcos is the president of the Philippines.
Oh,
So I'm erring towards yes, but on it, like, it requires way more explanation of what he was opposing when he came into power, like what the forces of economics are like in the Philippines, maybe like some illustration of who the parties are, the party system. Like, this just name drops someone and says a policy. Like, I think it requires way more of like a thing. Group 1, you said no to cigarette smoke. Why?
like, I think the average informed voter knows what carbon monoxide poisoning is, and the average informed voter knows that if you smoke a cigarette, you don't get fucking carbon monoxide poisoning. Like,
Like every time you smoke a cigarette. Okay, I see that. Yeah, Group 3 is also on a no. Would anyone credit a cigarette smoke stuff? Would anyone credit the cigarette smoke stuff? Because there is evidence, in the medical community, to say that excessive smoking causes accumulation of carbon monoxide. I don't know if that's true or not, but I did a GCSE biology, so it's sort of in.
I don't think that's the same thing as like if you say poisoning in a debate. Like,
I also don't see how it's relevant when cigarette cause a lot of other things that are bad for you.
Yeah. I
Very
mean,
much
relevance of
more
all of these are different, right? Like I don't know when you'd say like any of this, but at the same time, it's just whether you'd credit something of this nature. I think people did some things really well, like the cricket one, yeah, absolutely, that's so easily creditable. I don't know what more analysis that really requires, apart from a breakdown of what colonialism is, but anyone knows. The fluorine one, yes, everyone did really well on that one, yeah, that's obviously creditable. Yeah, the Tupac one is a bit weird, because it's like when the fuck would you ever argue this? But at the same time, like, if there's a debate about what diss tracks are like, I mean, Hit 'Em Up was a diss track, so, this one people did pretty well on, like, yeah, who the fuck knows this? Like I had to Google that. This one is interesting because this is the type of thing that people like to use as facts and things like that. Like X importer or exporter or company does X thing most often. I personally wouldn't credit this because I think the average informed voter knows that LVMH is a conglomerate of a bunch of different brands that do lots of different things. So I think on average, it might actually average out champagne and spirits, but like during Christmas, like things like clothes become way more popular and things like that. So it just depends on the context of the things that they do the arguments. That was the point of the exercise. Also, just to have a bit of fun, learn some fun facts. Yes.
What's the one that my group's gonna get bullied by Eli for?
It's the green one.
Oh, that was the cigarette one. Yeah.
Oh, why are we gonna get bullied over that?
You're not.
Oh.
Yeah. That's fair. Any other questions? Cool. Close comparisons. This section is kind of just like in workshop 1 when I taught you how to adjudicate, except this time the comparisons are closer. Vertical closeness. I put oh boy because this is really fucking important. This is also any close comparison ultimately is a skill issue on the part of the speakers. El bozo to them if they're on the wrong side of a close comparison. Vertical closeness. There are 3 main reasons why this happens most commonly. There are other reasons too, but these are the 3 main ones. The first reason is that the closing team tries to prove the exact same thing as the opening team with new mechanisms. I would say this is the most common reason a bench comes close. Second reason is the complete inverse of that, when the closing team proves something literally, completely, entirely different on a completely different metric and doesn't bother to weigh this metric. The third thing, and this one is becoming, it kind of ebbs and flows, right? Because like big CAs and big people that write the manual will re-clarify that you're not supposed to be bent over for logical priority, and then people forget, and then they're re-reminded again. So sometimes closing is premised on something in opening, but literally everything else is better, and then for some reason judges think like really long and hard about whether that singular premise is something that means that their opening should take it over that. Cool. How to resolve some of these. If they prove the same thing, track the pathway that your closing is taken. And what I mean by this is it's the same as all of the stuff I would have said in the last workshop. So what burdens have they set themselves? What burdens do they actually have? And things like that. Basically, do the new mechanisms they provide do anything that is inherently better in the debate, absent of weighing? So does it make the impact inherently more likely? And what I mean by more likely is not it's not like with their opening mechanisms plus those mechanisms more likely, right? Because that's not fair. Because like they're a different team and they went after the other team. But independently of their opening, these 3 mechanisms, for example, make it more likely. Do they increase the intensity or the scope of the people that they're impacting and things like that? Or is it expansionary to the end impact that they achieve? So what I mean by this is basically, have they used mechanisms that are better? Have they used mechanisms that are more encompassing, more relevant to the motion, things like that? I think for all of the stuff that I said in the first workshop about how you can adjudicate on the net persuasiveness of these mechanisms, given the context and the burdens that they've set themselves, if they are just inherently better, then don't worry about people weighing and stuff. Again, this is all stuff that I covered the last one. If they use a different metric to weigh, like trying to adjudicate whether this weighing in and of itself is persuasive. So again, the stuff that I said in the last workshop about how weighing in and of itself is an argument. So you need to give it the same burdens as any other argument that you would credit in a debate. So is it proven? Do they prove is it comparative? Things like that. Very quick exercise. So the motion is this House believes that survival shows do more harm than good. Both opening government and closing government want to prove the end impact of individuals make worse choices because they believe that they can survive in the wilderness more when they're lost. The reason that I put this as the case is because this case is not very good, and often when the comparisons are very close, it's not very good. So yeah, assess these mechanisms. Who does it better? You can talk amongst yourselves for like 1 or 2 minutes. Sorry, your eyes are so open. All right, hands up for OG. Hands up for CG. We're basically split down the middle. Sadia, I'm going to start with you. Why do you think closing government is done this better?
I think, so I think the first point that closing government makes is kind of all of OG's points put together and in fewer words, I guess. As in specific situation, actual crisis situation is different, complicated, and so that's a good
Yeah.
thing to open.
So what was better about CG?
You just get different but more. Because the second 2 points emphasize how it's a survival show, so it's also the entertainment aspect of it is trying to cater to people, and then the third mechanism actually talks about how the show is convincing the people of preventing them from calling help. Because you get all of these things why in OG the accuracy of survival is inaccurate, but in CG you get actually this is what the show is trying to tell you through these mechanisms, which leads you to that impact.
Colton, you had OG. Would you like to push back? No, you had CG.
CG,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry. Carry on. No. I want to hear more. Do you have anything else on CG?
No, I just think that like it's more. I don't know. I think I liked the part about like perpetuating the idea that like humans belong in kind of like this natural environment, and it just like kind of increases like just or like I don't know, perpetuates this idea of like what it would be like that's just not probably applicable or helpful. And then I also think there's a little bit of a contradiction in OG when they say that like it makes people believe they can survive when lost, and then they exaggerate how bad the conditions are.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing about CG. I think it is probably true that they kind of restate the points that OG say in the first point, but I think the other thing they do is they try to introduce these new arguments that sometimes just have massive burdens. Like, I don't see how relating to a character means that you like don't argue out in a crisis situation. I also think the third point has, which is probably the most novel thing they bring, has a much higher burden than they probably assume it does. Because I think, what about these shows makes me think, oh, I belong in nature inherently, and so therefore I'm not going to ask for help. I just think there are probably more steps to them proving this impact than the things that OG say, which, absent of like proof of capacity or incentive analysis, I'm just going to buy the things that take the fewest steps to reach their impact, I think.
Brian, anything to add?
I'd agree with that. I sort of also think that some of their, like, just with what's written down, some of them could go the other way. So if you're saying that you want to relate to this funny strongman character, it's possible that you would know what is said in the show more and actually be able to do that. I don't see why that necessarily makes you worse in the situation. Or if there's very specific situations, that's probably easier to understand and therefore easier to learn things from and do things. Than OG's arguments are very intuitive and simple. If they oversimplify stuff, it makes less sense, or it's worse.
Eli?
I think it's a fair criticism of OG to say that they have an internal contradiction on the exaggeration point, and I think that is the weakest part of their case. I still think OG wins though, because the way that you should adjudicate internal contradictions is that you credit the first thing insofar as the second thing contradicts it. So if the shows oversimplify things, and then the analysis has some part of analysis that is then contradicted by they exaggerate how bad the conditions are, you just cancel out those two parts of the analysis and keep the rest of it, and I think even the rest of it is just like more convincing and has fewer logical links with similar reasons to what Leonda and Freya have said in closing government.
I also don't think they contradict themselves. Like, I think that oversimplifying something doesn't necessarily mean you make it seem less bad. You can also oversimplify it and make it seem more bad. Like, if there's a really, really nuanced medical disorder that someone has, and you say they're dying, you've simplified it, but you've maybe exaggerated how bad it is as well. I just don't think that there's contradiction.
And lastly, Nora.
Yeah, just in kind of finishing that, I think then if you exaggerate how bad conditions are and the show oversimplifies things, you then make people think that because it is oversimplified, they can survive in worse situations because the show is never going to let people die. Nature doesn't give a shit, right? So I think those two things actually link together quite well.
Yeah, I would be broadly of the opinion that open government is winning here. So, like, I think it is, like, I do think this would be close, assuming the net uncomparatedness of everything and stuff like that. So, yeah, this is the same as that. I think on these, because, like, on what, like, said here, and the quote we were saying, I think it is true that they maybe more persuasively deal with granularly how people buy into these things, and things like that. I don't think they're able to show like why this ends up leading to a net expansion of the net, basically, that opening government is able to throw out in terms of like the types of people that buy in and things like that. It makes it unclear whether this is more intense of a harm than what opening government is able to elucidate based on these same mechanisms. So assuming they reach the same conclusion, like, you know, burdens is one way of getting there, i.e. is it just more likely fewer logical like leads and things like that. But also like are they able to do anything on that? More in the debate, it seems not. Cool. The other two things, so the other two reasons why a bench comparison might be close, they've done something completely different or they're kind of premise. This kind of teeters back to the things I was saying in one, which is essentially you just default to your basics. What is a better reason to pass or fail the motion? And then you take yourself through the steps of doing that, just like literally any other comparison. So relevance, i.e. who is more relevant to the motion, therefore giving a better reason to pass or fail. Likelihood, so who more likely solves the problem that they're able to elucidate. Thirdly, weighing, like is one side able to weigh why their metric is more important in relevance and likelihood, so that's why the first two are there. The weighing will probably prove those two criteria. And the fourth is just intuition. If they do none of these, then which one intuitively like is likely to do the things that are relevant and likely to the motion. On the second one, which is that there's one premise that closing is premised on. Everything else they do is literally better. Just think about not being cringe. And what I mean by this is very often opening teams will analyze the trade-off of the motion.
Here.
The issue with that is the trade-off of the motion. They may as well have just repeated the motion. So, for example, if the motion was this house would ban cigarettes, if opening government says that fewer people smoke cigarettes, this means that fewer people get lung cancer. And closing government runs that this means less of an environmental impact because fewer people litter cigarettes. It would be pretty cringe to say that the call goes to opening government for the sheer reason that they analyze that fewer people smoke cigarettes. Obviously that is the case, you are banning them, my brother. So, if someone analyzes just the trade-off of the motion, yes, obviously closing is premised on it because that's the motion. But try and be nuanced on these premises and things like that. Don't call it an illustration extension. Anyway, so half and diagonal closeness. What you should ask yourself, basically, and the best way to do it, I think, is if it is very close, separate it into what they agree on and what they disagree on, thereby being able to come up with the margin or the margin of the clash. So it'll usually look something like this. For example, OG and OO agree on a group, or an actor, or an impact that they're striving for. They just want to get there in different ways. So they disagree on the means to which they get there. But one side, and then via looking at things like rebuttal, etc., things like that, you either find that one side is more relevantly doing what they're doing based on the motion, or that they're more likely to get there because they prove incentives, or they prove something like capacity, or something like that, asymmetrically that the other side was unable to do. I think this is the best way of doing it, insofar as sometimes these close comparisons that are either diagonal or pairwise become quite complicated because they fire off rebuttal at each other. A bit of mitigation here and a bit of flips here that you don't really buy and things like that. So I think the most certain thing you can do is just figure out what they agree on and what they want to win on and things like that. And then you can throw in what else they win on after you resolve this. The issue with this sometimes is sometimes it looks like this when they agree on nothing and they disagree on everything. And this is a problem because then you can't adjudicate the clash or they agree on. This is when, so the reason I think this happens, because most of the time they actually do agree on something, or at least some sort of similarity in metric. The reason that this sometimes happens is judges haven't properly tracked the second speaker or haven't properly tracked rebuttal. For example, the deputy is able to revitalize what the clashes are or things like that, or something like that, but this is not being listened to by the panel well enough. So in these scenarios, you should look at the following. So firstly, what has been rebutted, mitigated, taken out, and what has been flipped, right? Because if they have engaged on literally anything, then something would have been mitigated, something would have been taken out, or something would have been flipped. Otherwise, there was literally no engagement between the two sides and things like that. And I would posit it's quite difficult for a clash to be close if they've not engaged on anything, because you then just adjudicate on like likelihood, relevance, all that other stuff. So if it is close, it is likely that these things have happened. So you can probably adjudicate on these things and the relative margins of these. The second thing is, if they've somehow not engaged, but they are somehow close, then it just differs back to what burdens have they set themselves, what burdens do they actually have they met them, relative degree on this, and then all of the other things I was talking about on integration and things like that. Are there any questions on close comparisons? I recognize I just went through how to do a comparison normally and put the word close in there, but I think the broad thesis there is just to overcorrect or to overthink about the correct things to do in judging on close comparisons, just because they become more rigorous and they become more virulent in panel discussion. So you need to get your basics as solid as possible on those, because otherwise, it ends up bad. Seeing none. How to manage a deliberation. So you've been promoted to chair now, because you now have to do close comparisons. And so the hard thing about chairing is you have to do a fuck ton. And this is the opposite of the panelist. So it's hard to be an excellent panelist because you get nothing to do. It is also hard to be an excellent chair because you have too much to do in the 15 minutes that you have. You have to manage your wings and cut them off. You have to focus the comparisons and focus the discussion. You have to listen to people. That's kind of tough sometimes because people can be stupid. You have to call votes and get rolled. I would know. You have to ask questions and make those be good questions in order to streamline the discussion, things like that. You also have to lead the discussion on allocating speaker scores. I would assume that most of you know when you're chairing, you should how to focus comparisons and things like that to make sure they're pairwise. You're doing opening government versus opening opposition, closing government versus opening government. Not getting the other teams and stuff into there. Again, this is more basic stuff. This is advanced judging, so I'm not covering that. Firstly, capping wings, telling them to shut the fuck up. There's a few ways of doing this. The first, I realized I said few ways, and then I gave one way. There are a few ways. The first is you tell them before they speak how much they've got. So for example, that would be me looking, me looking like, Matt, 30 seconds, summarize opening government's contribution. Or, Colton, 90 seconds, summarize the why you think opening opposition is beating opening government. So you already place a time cap on your wing before they even start speaking. I think this is a good thing to do insofar as, it means you have a good notice of time and things like that. And wings can't feel unjustifiably cut off when you cut them off after 90 seconds, because you told them that they had 90 seconds. Sometimes you might come across as a bit of a cringe chair, or whatever. Chairing is a cringe thing. The second thing you can do is direct with questions. So that would be me looking like, Leander summarized the opening government contribution. You start to read, I'm like, okay, what about this? Do you think they proved this? Okay, based on this, how would you compare to opening opposition? So rather than just letting him ramble on and on, I cut him off and ask another question to streamline the discussion to where I want the discussion to go. This seems a bit gamey, because sometimes panelists want to talk about something else, but you're the chair, you get to decide what they want to talk about. The third way is just to cut them off after they're speaking. I would say this is the least good thing to do, because sometimes panelists are in the middle of something, they have no idea, they're flying into the dark and things like that. So I defer back to the first thing that you can do. This is a scenario. So you're chairing with 3 wings. One wing believes that CO beats CG for first place. Every other comparison is unanimous across the board, and you and the other 2 wings all have the same call, CG, CO, and then the top half. So you disagree with this contention, you ask for initial justification, and the wing basically just says, oh, I think CO responds well to CG, and flips their case. So you ask for what the flip is, and this is the wing's response. talk amongst yourselves for like 2 minutes. What I want is the exact point in the spiel when you would cut this motherfucker off. Matt, when are you cutting them off? Oh,
2 seconds into the 10 seconds. Switch to someone else.
Cyrus.
Probably at the end, to be honest. Because by the time he gets to the flip, then I don't want to cut it off because he's explained the flip.
He's
Or
explained
means
the flip.
At the second that the word mitigation comes out of his mouth, then I'm telling him to get to the flip.
Yes.
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 Absolutely. I think this is where I would also cut this individual off, because I've asked specifically for the flip. It's fine if you want to look over your notes and things like that. I've asked you a direct question, so you probably will need to look at your notes, etc. But yes, as soon